experience in the social sector. So, Jeff Edmonson, stage is yours.
Thank you so much. So that's the first time anybody has used that little word in an introduction, so all of a sudden I feel validated. This is outstanding. It is great to be here. It's been a pleasure working with George and his team at Educate Texas. Clearly, a lot of you are thinking about the question that I think Amy teed up so nicely, which is the point of the video, that data is power, right? And I don't think there could be any better way to point that. I think it puts a fine point on it. And we've learned two big overarching goals about the fact that data is power. And one is that there's technical issues with it, and the other thing is that there's utilization issues with it, right? And on the technical side, we got all these issues around how are we going to make the data systems hook up. She talked a little bit about that, and just the intricacies of privacy issues and all those policy things that go along with it. And believe it or not, I actually think that's the easier nut to crack, right? I think we're going to crack that. There's really smart folks out there that are really taking this on, and we've actually got a team that is trying to figure this out with a platform that we've been working on with Microsoft. But somebody's going to figure this out, right? The harder piece is the utilization piece, right? Once you've got the data. And we've just had the privilege of bringing on 3 or 4 incredible staff. And one of them is a resource coordinator at a school in Cincinnati. And in Cincinnati, we built this great dashboard, right? Where in a school now, you can see not just what how the kids are performing academically, but you can actually see all the social services and nonprofits that are serving that child. Is right there. It's literally at the press of a button. But her challenge in that school, she's been there for 7 years, working every day, was actually getting the principal, the vice principal, the teachers, the parents, to actually look at the data so that they were using it in how they serve the child, right? And so a big part of this movement from collaboration to collective impact is indeed that data is power, right? Data is being used in new and different ways. But the biggest thing we've got to figure out is how are we actually going to make sure that the data is used every single day in every decision we make in order to better serve kids, right? And so that's the nut of what I'm going to talk about today. All right, so how many of you have read that collective impact article? Okay. So Jeff is here from FSG, and I know he's read it. He's his colleagues that wrote it. But I always open up these presentations mostly to downplay expectations and saying that article is a very sanitized version of reality, right? It is awesome that they captured it so succinctly and wonderfully, but I had the privilege of founding the Stride Partnership in Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky. And I can tell you that the struggles of trying to figure out how to get people to work together effectively every single day, day in and day out, is phenomenal. And it didn't happen overnight. There wasn't, I was joking with somebody that, you were saying, it's hard to get our fingers on that data. And I was like, what? All you have to do is go like this, and it just shows up, right? Isn't that great? The realities of getting the data is extremely difficult, right? So I had the privilege of founding that partnership, and you got a few other experts in the room, in Bob Wimpelberg and Hannah, who have here in Austin, and Bob's in Houston, who are waking up thinking about this every day. How do you figure out how to get people to work together? But I had the privilege of founding this partnership in 2005. And I'm going to tell a little bit about that story, but then I want to launch in very honestly into the lessons that we've learned. But the ultimate impact, just to start right from the get-go, is that if we're going to do this concept of collective impact effectively, is that the ultimate impact is not that we should need more money to do more stuff. The ultimate impact should be if we actually had the same amount of money, that we could get better results, right? And that would be a better social return on investment. And one of my mentors in life told me that good strategy attracts great investment. So I actually believe that if you can demonstrate this, you may see more money, right? Because I think people want to invest in a winner in general. Whether that could be hard dollars, but it could also be their time and talent that the community will put into doing something better, right? People want to be a part of a winner. Like right now, people in Atlanta are really happy, right? People want to be part of the Atlanta Falcons.
Absolutely.
Was that an amazing game?
Yes.
Sorry to use football for those who don't like it, but that was just awesome. But people want to be part of a winner, and so my hope is that by doing this work well, by making this shift from collaboration in and towards collective impact, that we can actually realize a better social return on investment. So the first realization in Cincinnati that took us about 2 years to get to, once again, this was a long-term process. And I don't think any other community, hopefully it has to take this long, because you can learn from the mistakes we made. But the first realization we had to have in our community was that the education, business, nonprofit, philanthropic, and civic sectors were all viewing education as this, right? And that's just silly, quite frankly, right? We now have the research that says 90% of brain development happens by age 3, right? How could we possibly think that this is education? I have 4 kids, 2 sets of twins, right? That frightens the heck out of me. That stat scares me to death. But for kids who might not have parents who are worried about that every single day of their lives, right, who are actually thinking about that, how do we think that education just in the Little Red Schoolhouse is going to solve that particular issue? And then you've got the higher ed system, and then you've got workforce. So the big thing that we had to come to was that education was actually an integrated net of all different types of supports, and we're investing money in all of it, right? In our community, we call it spray and pray, where you spray resources all over the place, and you pray really good things happen, right? And what was happening in our community, we realized, is that these connectors were not there. There were a lot of great things happening in silos, and quite frankly, there were a lot of not so great things happening in silos. And the question was, how could we pinpoint those things, whether they were in early childhood or higher ed, or in mentoring programs, tutoring programs, other after-school programs, social services, how could we use that data to actually identify what works and then to begin to create that connective tissue? That's really what we finally realized we were all about, right? And so we did all this visioning stuff, and we started to do asset mapping because we wanted to know every single thing that was going on here, right? And we very quickly came to realize that we were spinning our wheels. And we were spinning our wheels because essentially we didn't have a true north. I was just in another community where they talked about it as this true north. And the idea that hit us was we didn't really know where we were going with all this asset mapping. So finally somebody, it was actually the head of the United Way, among all of his peers, we had about 150 people in the room from all these different sectors. And he said, it seems after all these discussions we were having at 7:30 in the morning, people showing up, not really knowing what the heck we were all about, it seems like there's 5 things we're trying to get at. We want every kid to be prepared for school, supported inside and outside school, succeed academically, enroll in some form of college, and graduate and enter a career. This seems like what we're all about. And that felt like a breakthrough. And we actually went out on a bridge with about 300 people, and we made an announcement that we were going to make that happen. How do you think that went? Anybody got it? It was horrible, right? Because for like 2 weeks, everybody was all fired up. But then after that, everybody started to ask, how are you actually going to make that thing happen? Right? You got the mayor, you got all these key players involved. It's wonderful. And we kept trying to asset map our way to paradise. And finally, somebody said, I think our problem is that we still don't know where we're going. Right? Has anybody here seen the movie Lincoln? Anybody see this? I'm not going to blow the movie in this, but there's this great scene in there, there's this great analogy, where he said, I was growing up and I was a surveyor, and I learned the value of a compass. And I guess this is where the true north thing comes from. He said, I learned about true north. He said, and it was just amazing to understand the value of knowing that direction. He said, but I also very quickly realized that if you don't know the path to get to your true north, then you're going to end up sinking in a swamp or dying in the desert. Right? And our job as leaders is to figure out what's the path to get to our true north. But even though we had these wonderful, big, hairy, audacious goals, we still did not know what our ultimate true north was. And our true north was these outcomes that our community believed if we didn't move, quite frankly, we were failing. And so for us, it was 8 things. It was kindergarten readiness and literacy, 3rd grade reading, 8th grade math, high school graduation rate, and a host of post-secondary outcomes, right? Readiness, entrance, retention, and completion. These were the dials. When we boiled it all down, we started with about 150. We had every community partner in the world that wanted their outcome up on that list, right? And initially what I did is I went in a room with 5 really smart people, right? And we narrowed down that 150 into about 15. And then we came back to this big old partnership and we said, these are the outcomes. How do you all think that went? Not so well, right? I'm quite frank, the partnership almost died on the spot. But what we ended up doing was having some strong leadership, the head of the universities in our case, and the head of a couple of the major philanthropies who stood up and just said, listen, we need a better process to get there. So we ended up finding all the key data experts in our community. We ended up pulling them all together. We ended up developing some criteria. We took that list of 150, and after we narrowed it down to things like, can we actually get the data, right? It's wonderful to say we want to measure parent engagement. Does anybody in here know how to measure that effectively? You know what I'm saying? So you ended up developing some criteria and saying, we're just going to start narrowing this down. And by the end, it was obvious what the outcomes were that we were going to pick. Now, did we say these are the perfect outcomes? No, but they met all the criteria. And for right now, this is our true north. This is where we're headed. That made all the difference for our community, right? So I think one of the first lessons that I would just hand off would be, the true north has to be, what are you actually going to work to accomplish together, right? So let me just do one more and then I'll pause. What we've seen now is that every year we put out this report card. And across 3 urban, has anybody ever been to Cincinnati? By the way, Austin, how many of you are from Austin? Wow. Right, you drive in from the airport and you just get this feeling of growth and opportunity here. It's outstanding. But in our community, in Cincinnati, it's right on the river, it's on the Ohio River, and there's 2 states that make up the urban core of Cincinnati. It's Ohio and Kentucky. And the urban core is actually 3 cities. It's Cincinnati, and then Newport and Covington, which are on the Kentucky side of the river. And some people call it not the Ohio River, but the Ohio Ocean, because people don't like to play well with each other, right? The idea that somebody from Kentucky could learn something from anybody in Ohio is a little bit crazy. So we had all those issues, but we waded through all those issues, and now every year, across those 3 cities and the key public and parochial school districts and the higher ed institutions, we release the data on those 8 outcomes very transparently. Right? We're about to put out our 5th report card. And every year we're able to see what is the trend since the baseline year, what's the trend since the most recent year, and what kind of progress are we making over time to get to some target. And we actually didn't set the targets until a year and a half ago. It took us forever to get to the targets because nobody wanted to really set the targets and hold themselves accountable to it. But we eventually got there. And every year we then look at this across all these community leaders and we say, what are we doing right that's getting the green arrows? Right? And let's do more of that. And we delve into the data to figure that out. And why are we seeing the red arrows? And we delve into that. And then we develop a coordinated, cohesive action plan across all the players to try to move that. Right? And the good news is right now we're seeing more of those student outcomes across that cradle to career continuum trending in the right direction. Right? So we have 8 outcomes across 3 cities, across multiple higher ed institutions, across multiple public and parochial districts. And consistently every year, over the last 4 years, we've seen more outcomes trending in the right direction. And we haven't done it by starting new stuff. There have been exactly 2 new things started. 2. Right? One related to teacher quality and one related to early childhood. That's it. What we've done is identify what are the existing practices that are behind the green arrows and what are the existing resources that we could use to get better results related to these outcomes. Does that sound good? Questions on that part of the story? And then I'm going to get to our real lessons. Right? Any questions on that? Yeah.
I'd be curious about the planning part.
The what?
I mean, the planning part. I mean, if you've got the data and your partners are in the room, and then you plan with everybody, that part.
Yes.
You plan with everybody.